Hello, my name is Rabbi Abram Goodstein of Congregation Beth Shalom, and I gave this sermon on July 23rd. This week's Torah portion is a treasury of liturgy and Jewish values. It contains the Ten Commandments, the Shema, the V'ahavta, and parts of the Aleinu. And these are famous liturgical values. However, what's less famous, but in my mind just as valuable, is a little unassuming verse in chapter 5 of Deuteronomy. Right after Adonai offers the Ten Commandments, God says something surprising. God says, I hope that you will always revere me, and I hope you will follow all of my commandments, and that they may go well with you and with your children forever. What is so compelling about this verse is the weak language. Why doesn't God just say, you will revere me, or you will follow my commandments? Instead, God simply states that God hopes that the Israelites will do it. In the language of the divine, this difference of wording has vast implications. And those implications are a difference between free will and predetermination. Whether we have free will or our destinies are predetermined is a deep, fundamental discussion in our tradition. Annoyingly, the Bible equivocates on this issue. On one hand, you have the story of Exodus. Pharaoh does not let the Israelites go because God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh's actions are a product of predetermination. On the other hand, you have this line in Deuteronomy where God hopes that we follow God's commandments. This topic is perfect ammunition for a people so famous for their arguing. But, surprisingly, our rabbinic ancestors did not argue as much as I would have predicted. In fact, they were pretty much in alignment that humanity is responsible for its own actions. We are not walking paths already carved out for us by Adonai. In Pirkei Avot, which comes from the Talmud, it states, everything is foreseen, yet freedom of choice exists. This suggests that even though God may be capable of making the infinite computations required to foresee the results of all of our choices, God doesn't actually choose them for us. The Talmud has another quote, stating everything is determined by heaven except the fear of heaven. This attaches an ethical clause to a free will doctrine. God may be able to decide the ultimate fate of an individual, but God only makes this decision from the good or bad choices of that individual. Maimonides, a medieval Jewish scholar, said, every person is capable of being as upright as Moses or as wicked as Jeroboam, wise or foolish, kind or cruel. The Creator does not predetermine whether a person should be good or evil. Otherwise, what room would there be for the entire Torah? I really love Maimonides' interpretation because it highlights that free will is actually a beautiful opportunity to improve ourselves. There are so many great quotes out there. Almost all of them said that we are a tradition that believes in the benefits and responsibility of free will. But my sermon is only halfway done. Because if we ponder whether humans have free will, the next logical step is to ponder, does God have free will? And Judaism has grappled with this problem for as long as this tradition has existed. Because bad things happen to good people. As Rabbi Plaut, author of the Reform's official Torah commentary, puts it, can God make choices that don't fit with our own human understanding of justice, and yet simply because God is divine, claims ethical rightness on a higher level? Now, Rabbi Plaut is saying a lot here, and to unpack it for you, I have another Talmud story about Moses, where he is given the vision of the martyrdom of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva teaches Torah during the times of the Romans, and because of his actions, the Romans kill him. When Moses approaches God after this vision and asks why this happened to Rabbi Akiva, God responds, silent, such is my will. This would be an example of God claiming ethical rightness on a higher level. If God does have free will, are we limited by being human to understand God's divine choices when they don't make sense to us. If Judaism holds us responsible for our own actions, then how can God be held responsible for God's actions? And this is an incredibly Jewish question. Because as Jews, we have suffered. I'm referring to the persecution of the Jewish people as slaves in Egypt, the Crusades, and the fact that Jews were at one point or another kicked out of most of Western Europe. And I'm referring to, of course, to the Holocaust. And there is this movie, which I mentioned in my sermons before, that wonders the same thing called The Quarrel. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's really good. And it's about two Jewish learned men who argue about the ethical nature of God. One man, an Orthodox rabbi, says that if he knew God, then he would be God, because God only can know why God put the Jews through the Holocaust. While the other Jewish man, an agnostic writer, says if he knew God, he would put God on trial. The Orthodox rabbi believed that God had a divine reason to put the Jews through the Holocaust, while the writer wants to hold God responsible for it. And the Holocaust not only upended our biblical and Talmudic understanding of God that we inherited from our ancestors, but it also prevented us from having a unified view of God. Rabbi Eugene Borowitz explains it like this. We can no longer be satisfied with the old Jewish apologies for God's bungling of reward and punishment, life after death, suffering out of love for the sake of others, redemption by the Messiah, and the like. They are not utterly false, yet after the Holocaust they are empty. But despair too is wrong. We must live. But what can it mean not to despair after the Holocaust? Madmen are more truthful witnesses to the insanity we live through. However, the final word cannot be insanity, says Borowitz. A cruel duty is laid upon the survivor not to forget, and not to let the world forget, as it would dearly like to do. The persecution of the Jewish people has changed Judaism in the most profound ways. As the inheritors of the Jewish tradition, it's our job to remember and remind, but not to despair. And I believe the future of Judaism rests on our own personal and unique views of God. Because the belief that God has free will and follows a divine law that we can't understand is not a belief system that works for everyone. We need to develop our own ways of understanding God. Ones that include the Holocaust and all the bad things that happened to us. But I ask that you don't forget all the good things that happen in our lives as well, including the Ten Commandments, the Shema, the V'ahavta, and the Aleinu, and how we were able to celebrate Shabbat even when something as biblical as COVID had tried to stop us. Thank you, and take care. Yeah, Rabbi Abram wants Jewish babies. I feel like I'm a male, but I have like a yenta soul. All I want to do is connect people. I want Jewish babies. That's all I want. Is that too much to ask for? Oh my God. Jewish babies? Okay.